And here we go. Well, it's so good to see everybody this afternoon. And I almost said tonight, but it will be shortly. And I'll tell you, Cheryl, this weekend we had a wonderful immersion trip to Frankfurt over Friday night and Saturday, touring the Capitol and things, or touring the old Capitol. But Wendy had lined up a scavenger hunt there in Frankfurt, so we had 40 of the best with us, and absolutely wonderful weekend on an immersion trip. Had a little snow, a little cold, but had a lot of good hot coffee and hot chocolate and things like that, but just a wonderful time. But as you know, I said earlier, this group is absolutely a wonderful group of leaders. So I will turn it over and let you guys get started. We're recording, we're rolling, and everybody, Wendy has got strep throat and Addie has the flu. So they're both sick and not feeling well. And I told her not to join. So you got me tonight, as always. I always attend whether she's here or not, and love being here. But we absolutely will miss her, and you all keep her in your thoughts and prayers. So I will turn it over again. Let you all roll with it, Cheryl. You all take it and go.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jim, for that warm welcome. And I am so sorry to hear that Wendy and her children are sick. That is no fun at all. I'm Cheryl Letterly. I think most of you have joined us on the last session, and I will say Kathy and I were both really energized by what you brought to the previous webinar, and we're so grateful for that. We're so excited to hear what it is like in your classrooms. A little bit later, our colleague Dana Bell will join us. She was not with us last time, but she is our reference expert. So let's roll on. Next slide, please, Kathy. And I'm going to stop my video because just because for bandwidth, to make sure that we can stay together. So here's what we have planned together for today. We're going to explore some techniques for constructing searches on loc.gov, the library's website. And then we're going to spend just a small amount of time thinking about key considerations for selecting primary sources for instructional use. And that's a place where we rely on you really to think about your own students, your own instructional needs, and talk about what do you think about and what do you select. And then first I'm going to pause for a moment and ask you to think about and share, if you'd like, what questions do you have about finding and selecting primary sources from loc.gov, the library's website. And I appreciate that you have all had long days. So if you care to put some things in the chat, we'll get to your questions. This is one of the great things about the chat, and with 3 of us on, we'll monitor that. So if, as we're talking, you come across a question, we'll make sure that we answer as many as possible. Kim, thank you for starting us off with, can you search by overall topic? Dana will get into that and talk about what the search function does and does not do, and how to think like a research librarian. But please use the chat to keep putting those questions in. I'd like to start by a quick review of some shortcuts. We talked about a lot of these last month, but I hammer on these a little bit because they're so useful. The free to use and reuse sets are, as you may recall, themed sets of materials that have been reviewed to be sure that they are free of copyright entanglements, so that you can use them however you would like in classrooms or even commercial products. So that's one. And again, we will push out a PDF with all the links. So don't feel like you have to scramble. Don't feel like you're like, wait a minute, how did she get there? These really are just screenshots of useful places to go. And we will make sure that before you leave, you have all of this information again. And if anybody has to leave early, just put a note in the chat and I'll get that out sooner. So the next shortcut that I'd like to highlight are the library's blogs. You can see at the bottom right, the Teaching with the Library of Congress blog, but many other parts of the library maintain blogs on science, on law. If we could scroll down the list, you'd see manuscripts, you'd see maps, prints and photographs, and so forth. And those are wonderful places for finding sort of hidden treasures with context by experts. The next highlight I'd like to, or shortcut I'd like to highlight, are the classroom materials. These come out of the office where Kathy and Dana and I work. And I'd like to show you one particular one that we didn't look at last time. Next slide, please. And that is, we have state-specific sets, including a set for Kentucky. So Dana's going to talk in just a few minutes about searching, but you don't have to start with a live search. A couple more just helpful tips I'd like to show you. And that is, in addition to doing your own searches, you don't have to be on your own. What's on screen right now highlights a service called Ask a Librarian, and that is just what it sounds like. There are reference librarians on staff who will field your questions, and Dana can talk a little bit more about that. One more slide, please. And this shows how best to reach us. That's the page that you would get to if you clicked into Ask a Librarian, and the orange circle is around teacher resources. And I really do, I mean, you can certainly send your question elsewhere, but I highly recommend starting with teacher resources. Dana will forward your question around to colleagues if she needs that help. But Dana's been doing this for quite some years, and she has a great handle on what teachers need, as well as knowing the library's resources. So I'm going to mute myself, and I'm going to invite Dana to come on and show you some of the magic ways. It looks like magic to me. I've worked with her for close to 2 decades now. To watch Dana search the website really does look like magic, and she's going to share some of the tricks. So thank you so much, and I'll be back on in a little bit.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm looking forward to talking with you for a few minutes and showing you a few resources that you may use in terms of searching. I won't have the chat up, but I'm sure that at the end of this, if you have more specific questions other than the ones that have been provided, I'll be more than happy to answer them. First, one of the questions that was asked was, can you search by can you do a search across the collections? And the answer is yes. This box up here where it says everything is called the cross collection search box. It searches across nearly everything on the library's website, excluding things like the online catalog and Chronicling America, which I'll be showing you in a few minutes. So you can search in here, and we'll do a cross collection search in a minute, but I want to show you first that you can search by a specific format. For example, you can search for films, you can search for photographs, or as we're going to try here, you can search for maps. And I'm going to type in Kentucky and hit the search. And we're going to hope that, yay, life is good. We've been having hiccups with the website, so that's why I cheered. What you're seeing now is the beginnings of the search result for maps of Kentucky. You'll see that the default is everything that's available online. So there are over 3,000 maps of Kentucky, but only 865 are available. And I tend to change my search results when I am playing around. For example, the default is list. I much prefer gallery because it means I can see more. You can change this to search by the relevance, by the title, by the date. Ignore shelf order. You probably don't need to be aware of that, but if you want to know what that is, I can tell you what that is. So I'm going to click where it says go. Oops. And it didn't do what I wanted it to do because I didn't click here to go. So this is the gallery view. The other default is grid and slideshow. Gallery tends to work best for me because it allows me to see the basic information about the map. While we're here, I'm also going to point to the left where you have refine your search results. We'll see a deeper version of this in a minute when we do the larger search I want to do, but we give you the format. You can limit by date. So if you only want to see maps from 1700 to 1799 of Kentucky, you can do that. You can do location. You can do who created the map. If you want to see maps of Kentucky during the Civil War, you can limit by Civil War using the subject field. And occasion for some things you'll see available online or available at the Library of Congress. All the maps that I'm showing you are available online. It says available on the available at the Library of Congress. That means that you can only see it if you're on site at the Library of Congress. So be aware of that. So I'm going to scroll up. And I'm going to quickly look and see. I'm going to do this kind of quickly and then be naughty and say, I could look through 865 maps of Kentucky, but I don't feel like doing that. So I'm going to limit my search. And you guys were just talking about being in Frankfort, Kentucky. So I'm going to limit to Frankfort, Kentucky. And you'll notice I did that with the search that I already had. And I hit the search button. And now we have 10 that are available online of the 81 maps relating to Frankfort, Kentucky. And I'm going to click on this one right here, which is from 1871. And it's a bird's eye view of Kentucky, of Frankfort, Kentucky, I should say. We give you all the bibliographic information, the subject headings, other things like that. And if you look on this side, you'll notice that everything that's here is hot linked. So if you wanted to find other material about Frankfort, Kentucky, you could click here. And it's going to take you to everything that you can find about Frankfort. Now, mental note, sometimes this goes a little bit bonkers on you, and you'll notice you're getting Frankfurt, Germany, Frankfurt, New York, et cetera, but again, you can use the left navigation over here to limit to just Kentucky. So I'm going to click backwards. And enlarge this map. And yes, you can download this to your smart board or make it available for students to print out or so on down the line, or click in and get nice and close. And this is a great looking at a map of 1871 and comparing it, for example, to your trip to downtown Frankfort, Kentucky is a great comparison, contrast, looking at change over time. These panoramic maps are absolutely phenomenal, and I really enjoy using them. Okay. I'm going to take a second and glance and see if there's anything that jumps out at me. Okay. In terms of questions. And I don't see anything, so I'm going to move on. And I'm going to do a different search. And I'm going to search now for everything. And I'm going to do the subject westward expansion. Now you'll notice in the search results, I have over 27,000 items. And I know that you guys are not going to go through 27,000 items. That just is not going to work. So this is where the left side navigation is even more helpful. For example, if you are working with younger students, it's probably more likely that you're going to look at photographs, that relate to westward expansion, or maps that relate to westward expansion. You'll notice that we have 5 pieces of classroom material that are here. For example, Cheryl showed you the classroom materials. This is a primary source set on westward expansion. And this is a good time to remind you, as you see a couple of things here that might be a little problematic, that the Library of Congress puts things up without comment or without context. So you may want to work with your students and explain that the terminology used in the past is not the terminology that's used in the present, and that there are things on the library's website that will frustrate, stun, anger, surprise, and amaze every one of you. Another thing that's a great resource, and I'm clicking on this item. Whoops, this is America's Story from America's Library. I'm going to point it out to you and get out of here really quickly. This was created a long time ago, and it's aimed at younger audiences. However, it's old technology. So if you stumble on something in here, you might find some resources that are great, but I will encourage you to use other resources. But coming back here, you can limit by format. You can limit to materials that were created at the time, and I'm going to do that. And I'm noticing a lot of things that are coming up are reports that are congressional reports. Now, for those of you that are working with grades 4 through 8, these congressional reports have a lot of incredible information, for example, on the collaborations between the Native Americans and the government, or some of the travels that are taking place during westward expansion. For those of you, again, working with younger audiences, I'm going to pull up another map. And pray that so this is a map that's showing the principal mail routes that are west of the Mississippi River. So if you're doing, for example, the Pony Express, this might be a good map to share with your students. The other thing I'll point out to you is I did a very quick general search, just using the terms westward expansion. I'm going to do this because I'm an adventurer. In the chat, put in other if you were searching for westward expansion, but you are not allowed to use the terms westward expansion, what might you use? And you can put it in the chat and we'll see what comes up. Okay, Gold Rush. That's a good one. What else would you put? Frontier. I think Tail Road is railroad, but I'm gonna guess wrong. I'm gonna guess on that. Rag and Train, railroad, yes. Barrier. Marlene, you might give me a little bit more on that. Expansion by itself. Again, you might need to add a little bit more to that. Growth. Oregon Trail is a good one. Wilderness Road, Trail of Tears. So I'm pulling this up. Westward Ho, that's a good one. I'm pulling this up to remind you that you can try a variety of different terms. And I strongly encourage you to try a variety of different terms. Another thing to remember when you're searching is if there's cataloging material for the items that we have available online, some of that cataloging was done in the 1920s, 30s, 40s. So the terminology that's used then is very different in some cases from the terminology that we would use now. For example, another example, and this one doesn't relate to westward expansion. If you're looking for Eleanor Roosevelt and you're looking in our collections, in addition to looking for Eleanor Roosevelt, you might want to look for Mrs. Franklin Roosevelt or Mrs. Franklin D. Roosevelt, because that's the nomenclature that was used at the time. So play around with your searches, play around with the search terms, be creative when you're searching across the collections. Now I'm going to click here, and one thing that you will find handy is if this box is right here, the Library of Congress logo, you can always get back to the home page. So if you get lost or confused, you can always get back to the home page.
Deanna, I'm going to interrupt because you did a thing when you were searching for Frankfurt, and you talked about it a little bit, but I want to loop back to it because of the terminology. If you find an item that meets your needs, but you want to know what more there is, the subject headings in the item record can be gold. And that is
Absolutely.
one of my favorite tricks. And I'm sorry, I have fighting dogs at my feet, so I'm going to mute.
Tell Bounce and Max to chill out. So I've gone back to the search that I did, and I'm going to show you another set of maps that I absolutely love. And these are Sanborn insurance maps, and they document a community at a specific time, telling you what was there, what the houses were made of, and so on. And it's Cheryl, excuse me, 1 second while I take care of my throat. Cheryl mentioned it, and I'll point it out again. On the right-hand side, all of these you can use to search to find other materials. So for example, I did Frankfurt before, but I'm going to do Franklin County. And then do Franklin County, Kentucky. And you'll notice the pull down that's being very nice and saving my spelling issues. And again, you're seeing the large number of materials. And a lot of these are insurance maps from Frankfort, Kentucky. But you can limit by date. And I'm choosing 1800 to 1899. And we're continuing to hope that Okay. And we have three photos. So this is, I am assuming that we're pulling this up because, alrighty, we have Abraham, this is a political chart, and I'm assuming we're pulling this up because there is something relating to, well, there's the popular vote for president, and you can see that for Kentucky and other information and the principal cities. Nope, I guessed wrong on that. But again, explore. There is so much unexpected, interesting material on the library's website that you cannot imagine. Okay. Now, I'm back to the homepage. And Cheryl, if the dogs have settled down and you have other questions or things you want me to go over, let me know.
Thank you. We're good right now.
Oh, good. Tell the children to behave themselves. Okay, so we've gone to, I'm going to go here to digital collections. And this is where you can search an individual collection that's been digitized and made available online. Or you can come up here to the featured content and search for specific things. And we're going to search here, we'll go here to Chronicling America. And as I mentioned, right now, Chronicling America is not searchable across the library's website in the way that I just showed you. You need to go into Chronicling America. That is going to change. They're beta testing that as we speak. So hopefully that will happen soon. You'll note that you can search historical newspapers covering the years 1777 to 1963, which is a pretty healthy sized collection. In addition, you can do this search. You can limit to, if you only want things, say, from 1886 to 1936, you can also limit here. If you go to the advanced search, you have a wider search, so you could limit to only Kentucky newspapers, again by year. And then focus your search with any of the words, all of the words, a specific phrase, or with certain words within a certain limit to each other. You can also go into all digitized newspapers and limit to a specific ethnic group or newspapers from on a specific language. Last thing I'm going to do here is go into recommended topics. And, oh, there we go. All righty. If you go here, this is going to take you to the research guide for Chronicling America. For example, if you're needing a little assistance in finding things on a specific topic, you can go in and use these guides and see what guides are available. And since there are over, I think, 700 guides, you could search by a specific word or phrase, such as Thanksgiving. And this is giving you a little bit of information about Thanksgiving, a timeline, and they're specifically focusing in on Abraham Lincoln proclaiming Thanksgiving as a national holiday, and now showing that Thanksgiving is celebrated on the fourth Thursday of November. And then if you click here, we're giving you ideas for search terms that you might use and leading you into a specific newspaper article. And you'll notice that the word Thanksgiving, or in this case, Thanksgiving dinner, is highlighted in red. And again, you can go in and see detail, or go to the top and look at the page's text as a PDF or clip to look at a specific section and print that section out. So I am going to use this up here to go back to the home page. And I'm going to go back through the questions and see if anything is screaming at me. Okay. The question of how specific a search can you do? You can do a very, very specific search. However, I would not do, for example, I'm going to use one that's a favorite question that we got from a child once, where someone wanted to know Abraham Lincoln's favorite condiment. You're not going to find that probably. So that's probably too specific, but you could do Abraham Lincoln and food perhaps, and see if anything comes up relating to Abraham Lincoln and any food he ate or any food that was served at a specific event. In terms of finding things for specifically lower grades, you would find some of that if you're using the teachers page. But as I said in my discussion, you may want to say, I only want to look at, if you're working with kindergartners, maps or photographs, or newspapers, because sometimes the newspapers have a graph or photographs or other materials that might be of interest. Okay. And okay, I'm glancing through. Okay, I think
Dana, this is Kathy. There was a question about young learners, resources specific for, I think it was grade 2. But I'm just going to put the blog for young learners, and you might just want to cruise by.
okay, I can do that. Oops. What I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down to blogs, and I'm going to go to our blog, Teaching with the Library of Congress, and you'll see that, lo and behold, our good friend Cheryl has today's blog featured. And if you look on the, if you're needing a little bit of help, if you can search using the search box, but we do have categories here. And at the very bottom of our list of categories is young learners. And you'll notice that there are 41 posts where we've used the subject heading young learners. And I'm going to go and I'm going to skip that one. Okay. So here are a list of some of the primary source sets that are aimed at younger audiences. And we have some new ones that have been added, specifically the transportation and weather primary source sets that would have resources that would certainly be beneficial for younger students. And we were fortunate to have, as one of our teacher in residence, we've had a couple of K-5 teachers. This one is by Ernestine Sweeting, who was a K-5 teacher and features Teresa St. Angelo, who eventually did become our teacher in residence, and she was a kindergarten teacher. And this is giving you some tips on how she taught students using some of the collections. So I encourage you, if you're looking for materials on younger audiences, take a peek at our list of blogs that relate to young learners. Okay. And I will scan real quickly and see if there's anything else that's screaming at me, and I don't see anything. And with that, I will stop sharing and return it back to Cheryl.
Thank you, Dana. And I'm going to, while Kathy pulls up the slide deck again, I'm going to do one more commercial for, we will send you the PDF before we part ways from each other, so that you have all of this. Well, maybe not all of it. Dana went off script, but isn't that the joy of a live presentation? And of course, to save the chat. So a little bit, there we go. So what I'd invite you into now is thinking about, okay, when you're faced with 27,000 items or more or fewer, what do you think about when you're selecting primary sources for use in your setting to meet your goals, to meet your students' needs? And whether or not you've been thinking about it in those terms, I can tell from your questions that you're thinking about your students' needs. So what do you think about? Take a minute and just, when you're thinking about selecting primary sources, what are some of the things you think about? If you would add your thoughts in the chat for a minute or two. And if anybody really just is done typing and wants to unmute, we have time to take a couple of comments. The quality, how it pertains to your students and what you're teaching. Thank you, Jenny. Images or documents that spark surprise. Thank you, Rachel. Primary topic examples. Mary Jane, I would welcome a little more information on that. Will it meet your learning targets, relevance to content, age appropriate? What would interest and intrigue students? Help them answer questions about that time. How will students use them? What do you want your students to know or see? A wonderful waterfall of responses. Thank you, everyone. That aligns with what I have prepared very well, I think, although you've thought of some things that maybe I haven't included in quite the same terms. So I'd like to just walk you through, and I am going to be talking head for a minute. So you said instruction, and that's one of the things I was thinking about. Here are some of the questions. Kathy, this is just a click for every line. Sorry about that. What topic am I teaching? When will I be using the source? Where does it fit? Is it an opening motivation? Is it core instruction? Is it in assessment? What skills do you want your students to practice? Developing questions, identifying perspective, perhaps. Maybe it's vocabulary, maybe it's descriptive. So you talked about instruction, and we have some questions about that too that we think about it. And honestly, this question set comes from our own work. We don't have quite the focus that you do typically, but we do think about categories of students and learners. Next slide, please, Kathy. We also consider the students and ask, is the source appropriate for my students? We think about, is it engaging? Is it age or learning level appropriate? Reading level, document length, content. And just a note on that, what we hear from teachers, and I'd be interested if any of you try this and what your experiences are, but what we hear from teachers is even fairly young students can engage with complicated content if it's scaffolded and structured. So Dana mentioned newspapers having graphs, absolutely, but um, they also have titles, headlines. That's I could not think of that word for a minute. Headlines and subheadlines. There are a lot of verbal scaffolds in a newspaper, for example. And then the last thing I want to think about, as Dana said, there is something to offend and horrify everybody in our history. And the Library of Congress presents our history. So you want to think about, is there anything your students need to be prepared to encounter? You're fine, Kathy, go on. And then the logistics of it. So for example, when we're building materials, we think about, can it be easily read? Will students be able to identify details? Are there any rights issues with how you plan to use the source? We're publishing materials. I mean, it's our own materials on our own website, but we don't own the rights. So we think about the rights very deeply. And any other logistical considerations. So I want to get your hands messy with this for just a few minutes. And no, go ahead, Kathy. You were exactly where I wanted you. This is a screen capture of a search that Dana did a few minutes ago. We're going to zero back in on that primary source set westward expansion. Next slide, please, Kathy. And I want to focus your attention just on that top row. And I cannot do two things at once, so hold on. I want to push those 3 items out to you and ask you if you would please to open them up. And next slide, please, Kathy. We're not going to spend very much time on this, but maybe that's real, because how much time do you have when you're putting together your lesson plans, right? I was an English teacher for a decade, and I remember never having enough time. So maybe this is real. So what I'd like you to do is open that binder of 3 items. It's just the top row from the primary source set. Think about whether you focus on one item and share your thinking about whether you would or would not use it. Think about what skills students could practice with it. Think about the logistics and characteristics of the resource. Think about when you might use it and why and what your students would need. So I'm going to mute myself and give you about 2 minutes to just immerse in the primary source. Jim, a time check, we're going till 5 if we go that long?
Yes, 5 o'clock. Yeah.
5 o'clock. I will not go past 5. Just wanted to make sure I could go till 5. So
You're good.
Awesome. Thank you. So I'm going to mute myself and set a timer for 2 minutes. Where is it? The binder is in the chat. Is that what you're asking, Bobby? If that's not what you're asking, unmute and give me a few more words. Okay, you've got it now? Perfect. Thank you for asking the clarifying question. Just wanted to give you a little bit bigger view than what you can see on this screen in these thumbnails. And please, any other questions that you have, either put it in the chat or unmute. Otherwise, enjoy a couple of minutes studying these 3 items, make a selection of one and think about, and I recognize that you might not all teach westward expansion. So I'm just going to thank you for kind of pretending that you teach westward expansion or can make a connection to curriculum somehow. And we're just about a minute and a half in, and I appreciate that some of you are starting to share your thoughts. Thank you for that. Um, Feel free to call the left item meeting, the middle item progress, and the rightmost item homestead. And I want to thank you. When you get to a comfortable spot, go ahead and continue sharing your thoughts. And also feel free to ask each other questions if you want to know more about the thinking, or feel free to interact with each other in the chat or to unmute yourself. And it's been about 2.5 minutes. I got engrossed in reading your responses and forgot to look at the timer, because I really do cherish hearing from teachers. And I thank you for that. Sierra, you direct messaged me, which is pretty cool for me, but you might recopy that and send it to everyone, because your response is really, I think, valuable thinking of it. Thank you. Thank you. Lots of thoughts about how it would meet students' needs, lots of thoughts about how it would connect to curricular requirements, lots of thoughts on strategies that you'd bring in. This is really cool. We don't very often get to work with groups that have been together and use the same vocabulary. I'm really excited by seeing this and seeing your thinking. So thank you for that. And I appreciate that you're finding something that you could use in these, applying those thoughts. This is just about the end of what we have planned. So next slide, please, Kathy. What questions do you have? And this is just a summary. This slide is a summary of the highlights of where we've been. Library of Congress, Ask a Librarian, teacher resources, the teacher blog. We put in a bucket for the search term selecting, because we concluded today with talking about selecting primary sources. And we went through that pretty blaze fast. But I think you got what you needed to think about there. We also included a specific blog post on using item records, that that technique that Dana modeled so well with Frankfurt, and how to use the subject heading and then use the limitations on the left navigation to narrow the results back. But a former teacher in residence wrote a blog post a couple of years ago about her experience of that. And we wanted to include that because it's valuable. My understanding is the next time we gather, we're going to have sort of an open office hours kind of, you get to do your own searches. We'll virtually peek over your shoulders, be available. I hope that you bring to that some excitement, because you'll have about an hour. You'll have an hour. When do you ever get an hour when you can kind of poke around, right? And I hope you really will do some of the kinds of things that Dana described, which is, you're not sure what you're going to find, but you're going to poke around and see where you go. We call those rabbit holes in the office, and I don't think we're the only people who do that. Sometimes some of our best finds come inadvertently, unintentionally. So I would love bring the heat. Yes, yes, thank you. I would be delighted to field any questions. I'm going to stop talking for a moment because I can't do two things at once. I want to push out this PDF. It's kind of biggish, so it's taking a minute, but you should see a PDF in the chat called Finding plus Selecting PS, Finding and Selecting Primary Sources. That's the slide deck we ran through. Deanna's search was a little prepared, a little bit followed what she found, but you'll see the highlights of it in this slide deck. As always, if you have questions after the fact, please contact us. We love to hear from you. Seeing no questions, Jim, I turn
Um,
this back to you.
Can I make one quick reminder, just a gentle one? Again, if you get, Cheryl has mentioned it, but if you do get lost or confused, I am the teacher resources person for Ask a Librarian Teacher Resources. So please write in, say something that you are in the Kentucky group, and that will give me an idea, that will give me a reminder of what's going on, but I can certainly answer questions or express or deal with any concerns you might have after today's presentation.
Yeah, and this is Kathy. Thanks, Dana, and thanks, Cheryl. That was fantastic. I just want to make a plug for the December session that we're going to have. And that's really for you all to use us as resources. And we want to make that hour as productive as possible. And I'll work with Wendy on how we can set it up. You all do a lot more work together than just with us at the Library of Congress. And so if it makes sense to do smaller groups, to do breakout rooms, that kind of thing, I'll talk with Wendy so that we can make that session about you and your needs. And so I think what I would like to do is to send out a feeler through Wendy that we can be able to be prepared to show you some resources based on what you think you're going to be building and working on. So there will be some communication coming out regarding the next session. And that's it.
Fantastic. Cheryl, Kathy, and Dana, we appreciate it very much. And as again, another outstanding cadre. And again, you had 58 folks gathered here together, learning together in this community of leaders. So when I meant that, you ask a question about bringing excitement. This group is absolutely the best, and they do bring the heat every time we meet. And so anybody have any questions, comments, or anything at all? As you all know, I'll stay on as long as need be. And there's the evaluation. Please make sure you fill the evaluation out before you leave, and get that done. We want to pay you and count this credit. So great comments. Great. Yes, I enjoyed this very much and enjoyed seeing all you all. Again, I'll stay on as long as you need. And then Cheryl, Dana, Kathy, you all are welcome to stay on. If not, you guys can jump off and I'll hang out here a little bit and see if our folks have any questions about KEDC or KEDC grants or charge or whatever it may be.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, everybody. See you next month.